Welcome to the 80-20 show presented by your host, Jason Yee. Hello. Jason here from Train 2.0. And in this video, we're going to talk about player identity. Now, if you're lucky enough to be listening to this on the podcast or on the YouTube, here's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through a complete walkthrough of player identity, the process that I go through with players to help them define their identity and to find their identity, and kind of the process that I go into when I am helping a player. So the kind of the behind the scenes stuff. And what's going to happen is this is going to be displayed for about a week completely for free. And then I'm going to chop it off partway through and put the rest of it in the membership area. But I'm going to give you guys a whole bunch of value for free if you happen to be one of the people who's up and a subscriber. So, if someone else wants to watch this full thing before it goes into the membership area, then make sure to share it with them. And then let them know what it's all about. Now, this is a process that I've used to work with players to really make things clear for them, because here's the problem that tons of players face, right? Is they say, I want to be this, or my coach says this, and blah, blah, blah. But the emotion that they're feeling is frustration. They're anxious, because they're unclear on what the hell they're supposed to do. Their coach has told them, we want you to play this way. And the player nods their head and says, okay. But the player doesn't know what they mean. So that's kind of the problem that a lot of players face. And how can you tell if players don't have a good player identity? Well, they seem unconfident, or they lack confidence. They they don't have consistent performance. They don't seem to be playing at their full potential. All of this would indicate that a player doesn't have a clear player identity. So the first part, that's kind of the first part. So when I work with players one-on-one, and I only work with a few at a time, just because I really like to give each player a ton of attention. And the very first thing we often do is clear up what they're unclear on, who they are as a player. And we go through these steps, boom, 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 together to craft that player identity. So let's jump right into it. And I'm getting a question here from Maxi asking how size and weight matters in creating a player identity. So I'm going to cover that in the 80-20 rule, which we will discuss. So if you're watching on the podcast right now, I have a whiteboard up, or if you're listening on the podcast, I have a whiteboard up, but you'll be able to see the full presentation in the membership area with the whiteboard. Okay, first part, player identity. Okay, I talk a lot about if-then. Okay, now if-then is a way of linking in your mind, the situation to identify and the skill or the mechanics to execute. Some might call this reading and reacting. I call it if-then. And it's about creating links in your brain, associating what the identification event is and what your following action should be. So that's if-then. I talk about this often. And what this does is it gives a player a very clear way to tell when to execute certain things. So if I get the puck on the boards in the D zone, then what do I do? Because often coaches, like I said earlier, they're unclear. They just say things like, get it out, or don't make stupid plays, or whatever the hell they're saying. And the player's not clear on what they should actually do. It's not the coach's fault, but we help players kind of solve this. So if-then. So when we're forming our player identity, the first thing we want to do is look at our current if-then. Okay, so I call it the rule of three. So what we want to look at is kind of like 3 if-thens that you currently execute in each of the 3 zones. So if you're in the D zone, we create 3 if-thens for the D zone, 3 if-thens for the offensive zone, 3 if-thens for the offensive, the neutral zone, whichever one I missed. I drifted off there. And so what you'll do is 3 situations that occur often for you and your response to those situations. So that's your current if-then, the rule of 3. So 3 zones, 3 if-thens, what you're currently doing. So let's say you're known as a grinder, and you get the puck on the half wall in the D zone. Then what do? Then I chip the puck out 9 times out of 10, or then I skate as fast as I can, and I run into traffic. So do your if-then, or maybe you're a very skilled player and your if-then is, if I get the puck in the D zone, I always dangle 4 guys, but leave the 5th for the neutral zone. I don't know. So create your current if-then. Okay, what are you currently doing? The rule of 3. 3 in the 3 zones. The next part is your desired if-then. Okay? Now, your desired if-then is maybe you are a grinder, but you now want to be a skill player. So what would that look like in terms of if-then? If you're a skill player, it might be, if I get the puck on the half wall, then I do a reverse toe drag through my legs, dangle 4 people, and then I exit the zone, right? That might be your if-then. Okay, now I've got a couple checks and balances here to make sure that works out. When you are designing your desired if-then, right, this desired if-then, then what we do is we jump to number 3. Let's say there's a player that you want to play like. Maybe I should switch sides here. There, that's better, isn't it? Let's say there's a player that you want to play like, right? Let's say you're a really big PK Subban fan, and you want to be more like PK Subban. Then you might research what are PK Subban's rule of 3 if-thens. So if your situation is, get the puck as a D-man off a dump, then what do I do? And then watch some PK Subban videos, watch some Nashville games, and say, if PK Subban gets it off a dump, then what does he do? Okay, so you can use NHLers if-thens of the player you want to play like, and you can just simply figure out what they are, their if-thens, and then apply it to your game. Apply it to your desired if-then. Okay? So that's kind of like the first part of crafting your player identity, is first off figuring out where you are and then figuring out where you want to be. Now, the checks and balances part is this part, the 80-20 part. So Daryl Belfry has a great video on this, and this is kind of what first piqued my interest in this idea, at least when it comes to hockey. How was it like take 2 or something? His point is that you should be executing plays at about 80% completion rate. So a perfect play for, right? Let's say I have to get a pass and give a pass, right? Perfect isn't 10 out of 10. Perfect is 8 out of 10, okay? Because if you're not messing up 2 of the times, then you're actually not choosing a play that is challenging enough for you. And so you're probably making low-risk plays that are actually beneath your skill level. So what he said is a player makes a mistake. Here's what we want to think about. Now we have our current if-then statements. We have our rule of 3. Ask yourself, where it's 10 out of 10, then you need to find something more challenging. If it's 5 out of 10, here's what you got to do. One, upgrade your mechanics, right? Maybe you need to upgrade your mechanics, or maybe what you need to do is choose a different if-then, okay? So what I mean by this is, let's say your if-then is, every time I get the puck at the point, then I toe drag. Now, either one way to go about, and let's say you have a 40% success rate, right? That's not good enough, right? We need to have 80% or higher. So there's two options. Upgrade your mechanics, so become the best friggin' toe dragger there is, or choose a different if-then. So maybe when you get the puck at the point, it isn't a if I receive the puck at the point, then toe drag. Maybe it's like a, if I get the puck at the point, then I, fake shot, see if a lane's open, and then shoot. And if you adopt that if-then, and then you start with the 80%, sorry, I lost my train of thought. And then it now goes up to 80%. That's probably telling you that's a good if-then to have for your player identity. So there's kind of like, there's a few things going on here. There's some, with the current if-then, it's kind of seeing where you are. The desired if-then is kind of like, so that's kind of like your needs analysis. Your desired if-then is kind of like where you want to go. It's like the point on the map that you're aiming to get to. You can use modeling NHLers as a pathway to get there, right? To inform your rule of three if-thens. And then you want to use the 80-20 rule as your checks and balances to see if you need to upgrade your mechanics, maybe adjust your if-then, and see if there's something different. So this is kind of the process that I go through with players when I work with them one-on-one. I'm going to look at what are they currently doing, what's their current if-then, where do they want to get to, like what kind of a player do they want to be? They want to be X, Y, Z. You say, okay. So we design them some new if-thens, and then, in my head, I'm asking myself or thinking to myself, how good are their mechanics? Can their mechanics handle that? If yes, then okay, let's do that. If no, I might recommend a if-then that is adjusted so that it takes into account their mechanics. So this is kind of the process that I undergo when I talk player identity with players. And it's not like I really sit down with a player like, we're going to talk player identity, we're going to craft it today. But sometimes I do, and sometimes it's just part of the conversation. So if anyone's watching right now and has any questions, quickly, I have a couple minutes to answer, then I got to go to an event quickly. But yes, this is kind of a, and then another interesting thing you might be a couple things you might be wondering is like, why the rule of three, why 80-20, like how'd you come up with these numbers? The thing is, the numbers don't really matter because a number, it's really just arbitrary. The rule of three is a good rule to use. 80-20 is a good approximation. And one way you want to think of it is when imagine if you're writing a resume. Maybe you've written a resume, maybe you haven't yet, but in a resume, generally it's known that you shouldn't have too many words. You should, in fact, have the least amount of words. So the rule is, on a resume, if you had to pay $100 per word, like to have a word on the resume, how many words would you leave on, right? So if you take off more words, you get $100 back. Each word is $100. So of course, no one's actually going to pay $100 for you to remove words off your resume, but the rule works because it's a guiding principle for your thought. So that's what we're saying here with the rule of three and the 80-20. The precise numbers don't matter. In fact, the more precise you get, the more diluted you become, because there's very little precision in hockey. So the rule of 3 is just a good kind of rule of thumb guideline, and so to give or 2 to take or something like that. So I got one question here. Is it so Maxie's question is it smart to create an alternative if-then statement? Yeah, probably. So here's how I kind of let's talk about this. So the rule of 3, let's say that there are 3 kind of like situations, but each if-then statement for those 3 situations may be something that is nuanced. So let's go into that. So it might be something like one if-then. And let's say that if-then is puck retrieval. Right, now of course, I don't know how well you guys can see that. My writing is smaller there. But of course now there's 3 kind of different scenarios. So there's like no pressure, high pressure, and then medium pressure. So there's 3 things, right? High pressure, if then no pressure, high pressure, medium pressure, more or less, right? And then you might even have some others which are like, because your team sucks so much, you might have a few others where it's like branching off of here, where it's saying, support, no support, one support, so this is where, so what you can see here is kind of like a subset of if-thens underneath the subset, so a subset, where you have kind of like support, no support, or maybe one person supporting, right? So like for most people, let's say in the NHL, you probably don't need the if-then to be that nuanced, because most of the time you're gonna have support, or at least one support. So kind of your if-then is more related to pressure than support. But let's say you have a shitty team that, is sort of, let's say they're like, they're kind of just like, they're gone sometimes. So you need to now think, okay, what's the sub if-then for these 3 scenarios? So you could create a matrix table. So something like this, where you have So you could create some sort of a matrix table like that, or you could create a kind of like a neural network, like all those arrows there. Of course, I think the matrix is probably the simplest one, where you just kind of put in the situation and then put in the desired then statement, right? So that's kind of a way to think about the alternative if-then statements. And, I'll leave it up to you, because you guys are smart enough to figure out the if-thens, how detailed you need to go. Because, sometimes, like I said, in the NHL, you have support, so you don't need to get that detailed. So let's check here. Well, my idea here with this is so Maxie's asking, what do I think about rimming the puck? We'll pay attention to the outcomes, right? Yes, okay. Well, the table up here, top right, isn't supposed to be big at all. It's just, I'll make it bigger. I'll do that. But the idea is just to use a matrix, right? So Okay, sorry for that pause as I wrote that up. I just knew the sound quality wouldn't be good. So the table there is just kind of like high pressure, medium pressure, low pressure, no support, support, one support, right? Just as an example. And then you'd have response, situation A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So then you could create your if-thens that way, right? So that could be one of your 3 in-zone if-thens. Yeah. Yeah, so so Dan's talking about how off a D zone face-off when he sees some elite D rim it hard far side, but their winger is rushing his ass off to get there. And yes, that is a team strategy. They'll have a set breakout because they know that they can stress the opposing defenseman. But talking about the rims, again, let's go back to using this. This is a great example of a question on how to use the 80-20 approach. Now, let's look at the actual outcome. Like, is the outcome for you to reduce your turnover, or is the outcome for you to get the puck out of the zone, right? So if the outcome is for you to reduce your turnover, then the rim play will work what percentage of the time? 100% of the time, I would assume, right? Or, but if you look at the actual outcome that we're after, which is exiting the zone, is that 80% going to is that actually 80%? Probably not, because now that player is under a lot of pressure. So it doesn't pass the 80-20 test. So the suggestion would be to choose a different if-then, right? Different if-then might be, shake off the defender, create a triangle, make the pass, right? On a player's state to an open player, right? That might be your better if-then. Now, you might not be able to execute that at 80%. So what's the answer? The answer is upgrade your mechanics, right? So, or, we could also say your formula too, if you need to work on like your deception or blah, blah, blah. But let's just call it mechanics to make it simple. So that's kind of like your solution. So personally, I'll tell you, I don't want to, I do my best not to rim it. And, no elite defenseman is going to rim on a consistent basis. It's just not going to happen. You don't see in the NHL, it's a last resort play. I'm not telling you that you have to rim or not rim. I'm saying here's the argument based on the 80-20 rule. Let's see here. Yeah, so, it's because, so Maxi's just saying that that his coach tells him to do it every time off a face-off. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like, pay attention to the outcomes. Compare it to the 80-20, right? And see if that's the outcome that you're actually after. Now, most coaches are dogmatic and just follow the herd kind of thing and rim it. So they're not thinking about things in this way, but you are, right? So you can start thinking, 80-20 and apply it to the outcomes. Just remember, be clear on what the actual outcome is that you're after. Is it for you to reduce your turnovers, or is it for your team to get the puck out? Got a few other questions here. Yeah. Like I said, pay attention to the outcome that you're after, and then observe. Look at this little hair here. I always get to see these little hairs sticking out. And then pay attention to what you're actually trying to do, and then model NHLers to maybe adjust your if-then statement. So a lot of tools here to, craft your player identity. Come up with your current if-then, your desired if-then, model that off after NHLers. I don't know why 3 was last. It should have been 2. And then use 80-20 as your guiding principle to see, if you need to upgrade your mechanics or choose a different if-then or combination of the two. So with that, like I said, that's kind of what I go through with players that I work with one-on-one. But if you are studious and want to apply this yourself, which I know many of you guys are, you guys can begin applying this yourself.
Yeah. So Dan's saying, develop your proper if-thens, then make your mechanics strong enough to get it done 80% of the time. That's kind of the moral of the day. Well, that's a good way to end it. Thank you, Dan. Thank you guys for watching. And this was a lot of fun. Look at that crazy board here. Someone's going to come into this room after and say, what was that? Can you imagine if that was permanent? That'd be funny. Okay, I'm going to play the outro here, guys. Thanks for watching today, and we'll chat sometime soon. And listening to the 80/20 show hosted by Jason Yee. Be sure to check out more at train2.0.com.